There's a very particular feeling that hits when a show surprises the entire industry the way One Piece did when the first live-action season landed. And I remember the mood around it very clearly, because going in, people were nervous. Not casually skeptical, genuinely worried. Anime adaptations in Hollywood have a long, messy history. Fans have been burned before, studios have misunderstood the tone before, and somehow the heart of the original material tends to get lost somewhere between a green screen and a marketing campaign. Then the first season dropped on Netflix, and instead of collapsing under the pressure, it actually did something rare. It worked. Not perfectly, not flawlessly, but honestly enough that audiences felt the spirit of Ichiro Oda's world breathing through the screen. The weirdness was intact, the humor landed, the adventure felt big again. So when talk of Season 2 started circulating, it didn't feel like the usual corporate renewal announcement. It felt more like the next leg of a journey. And that brings us to the trailer for One Piece Season 2, 2026. Because the first time that footage started circulating online, the reaction was immediate. Not just from anime fans, but from people who discovered the story through the live-action version. Watching that trailer the first time, there's this moment where you realize the show isn't playing it safe anymore. Season 1 had the responsibility of proving the concept. It needed to show the world that a live-action pirate adventure based on one of the most beloved manga series ever could actually exist without feeling awkward or overproduced. Season 2 doesn't have that burden. Instead, the trailer leans straight into scale. It opens quietly, which is interesting. No explosions, no giant sea battles right away. Just the sound of waves and the creaking of a wooden ship cutting through open ocean. The camera drifts over the deck of the Going Merry, sunlight reflecting off the sails, and you see the Straw Hat crew moving around the ship like people who have actually been traveling together for a while now. That detail matters, because the chemistry between these characters was the secret weapon of the first season, and right away, the trailer seems to recognize that. You see Monkey D. Luffy standing on the railing again, completely fearless, staring toward the horizon with that same reckless optimism that defines the character. And what's fascinating is how relaxed the performance feels now. Iñaki Godoy clearly looks more comfortable in Luffy's skin. The physicality is looser, the grin comes more naturally, and you can tell the cast has spent more time inhabiting these roles. The trailer doesn't rush the introductions either. You catch glimpses of Roronoa Zoro training on the deck, swords moving in that controlled rhythm that fans immediately recognize. Mackenyu brings this quiet intensity to the character, and the footage shows that the show is doubling down on Zoro's presence as the crew's grounded center. Then there's Nami navigating maps across a wooden table below deck, the lighting dim and golden. Emily Rudd plays her with a sharper confidence now, like someone who finally trusts the people around her. You start noticing something else too. The world looks bigger. Season 1 mostly focused on contained environments, towns, ships, smaller locations that kept the story intimate. The Season 2 trailer starts revealing places that feel far more expansive. Snowy landscapes, massive coastal cliffs, harbors filled with ships from different pirate crews. And that's where longtime fans begin recognizing what direction the story might be heading. Because the imagery hints towards some of the early Grand Line arcs that fundamentally change the scope of the adventure. There's a shot in the trailer that really caught my attention. A towering mountain rising directly out of the ocean, mist curling around its peak. For anyone familiar with the lore, it strongly resembles Reverse Mountain, the legendary entrance point into the Grand Line. If that's where the story is heading, the stakes are about to change dramatically. Another interesting moment arrives about halfway through the trailer when the tone briefly shifts. The music slows down. The camera cuts to a darker environment, storm clouds gathering overhead. And then we see silhouettes of new figures standing on another ship somewhere in the distance. The show is clearly introducing new antagonists this season. And while the trailer avoids giving away too much, the framing suggests the writers are expanding the world's pirate ecosystem in a meaningful way. One of the things the original manga always excelled at was the sense that the ocean was filled with countless stories happening at the same time. The trailer captures that feeling beautifully. ships passing each other in the distance, bounty posters nailed to wooden tavern walls, Marines gathering in a war room somewhere far away. It creates the sense that Luffy's adventure is only one thread inside a much larger tapestry. And visually, the production design looks noticeably upgraded. Costumes appear more textured, the environments feel weathered by the sea, and the cinematography leans further into natural lighting, rather than the overly polished look that sometimes creeps into big streaming productions. You can see the budget being used carefully, not just on spectacle, but on atmosphere. Then comes the moment that probably sparked the biggest reaction online. Luffy stretches his arm across an absurd distance during a fight sequence shown in the final seconds of the trailer. The shot is quick, almost playful, but the visual effects look far more refined compared to Season 1. That's important, because Luffy's powers are inherently ridiculous if they're not handled carefully. The first season balanced that cartoonish elasticity with practical stunt work and smart editing. Season 2 appears to be pushing those abilities further, while still keeping them grounded inside the world. And the trailer ends in a way that feels perfectly on brand for this story. The crew standing together at the front of the Going Merry, the sun dropping behind them, Luffy laughing loudly as the wind tears through the sails. It's not trying to be epic in a manufactured way, it's just adventure. And honestly, that's what makes the whole thing work. If you freeze that final image from the trailer, the crew standing together at the bow of the Going Merry, with the wind tearing through the sails, you start realizing something subtle about where the story is heading now. Season 1 was essentially about formation, a group of strangers slowly discovering that they might actually belong together. But Season 2 feels like the moment that small crew finally steps into a world that's far bigger than any of them imagined. And the story really begins moving the second that ship leaves familiar waters behind. At the end of the previous season, the Straw Hat crew had already started attracting attention. Bounty posters were circulating, Marines were starting to connect the dots, and somewhere in the background, you could feel the larger power structure of the seas quietly taking notice. That tension carries directly into the opening stretch of this season. The crew is sailing with excitement, sure, but also with a new awareness that the ocean is watching them now. The first stretch of the journey has a strange calm to it. There's this sense of freedom on the ship that you don't see very often in large adventure shows. Long days of open ocean. The crew adjusting to life together. Monkey D. Luffy running across the deck like an overgrown kid who still can't believe he actually has his own pirate crew. Roronoa Zoro training with his swords at sunrise, the sound of metal slicing through air echoing across the water. Nami buried in navigation charts, constantly recalculating routes as the weather begins behaving in increasingly strange ways. And the weather does start getting strange. The closer they sail toward the entrance of the Grand Line, the more unpredictable the ocean becomes. Massive current shifts, sudden storms forming out of nowhere. The sky itself feels heavier somehow. Even experienced sailors would hesitate approaching waters like these, and the show does a really good job making that transition feel uneasy. There's a moment early in the season where the crew spots something unusual on the horizon. At first it looks like a cloud formation, just a massive shape rising in the distance. But as the ship moves closer, the camera slowly reveals the truth. An enormous mountain emerging directly from the sea. Water rushing violently around its base, currents twisting together like giant whirlpools. Reverse Mountain, the gateway into the Grand Line. For longtime fans of Ichiro Oda's story, that location is almost mythical. It's the place where the four great oceans converge, and where the most dangerous sea in the world truly begins. Seeing it rendered in live action is honestly one of the most ambitious moments in the entire series so far. The approach alone is chaotic. Ships are fighting currents that feel almost unnatural. Waves slam against the sides of the Going Merry with terrifying force. Nami is shouting navigation corrections while trying to read wind patterns that change every few seconds. Zoro and the others are scrambling to secure the sails. And through all of that chaos, Luffy is standing at the front of the ship, smiling. That's the moment you understand what drives him. Where other pirates might see danger, Luffy sees possibility. The Grand Line isn't something to survive. To him, it's the beginning of the greatest adventure imaginable. What follows is one of the most visually intense sequences the show has attempted so far. Instead of sailing around the mountain, ships entering the Grand Line actually ride powerful upward currents that shoot them along a steep water channel carved directly into the rock. The Going Merry is suddenly racing upward like it's being fired out of a cannon. The ocean is literally climbing a mountain. Water crashes over the deck. The crew is barely holding on. The ship is groaning under pressure, and somehow they make it. When the ship finally crests the peak and begins rushing down the other side into the Grand Line, the camera pulls back to reveal a completely different ocean on the horizon. The sky looks different, the water is darker, even the atmosphere feels heavier. But the first thing waiting for them isn't a new island. It's something far stranger. A massive shadow appears beneath the surface of the water beside the ship. At first, the crew thinks it's a rock formation or a reef, but then the shadow moves, slowly, deliberately. And suddenly, the ocean erupts as an enormous creature rises out of the sea. A whale. Not just any whale, a colossal one. Laboon. The show spends time letting this moment breathe instead of rushing past it. Laboon's presence is both intimidating and strangely sad. The whale repeatedly slams its head against the massive wall of the Red Line nearby, creating thunderous echoes that ripple across the water. And this is where the story slows down in a surprisingly emotional way. The crew soon discovers that Laboon isn't attacking ships out of aggression. The whale has been waiting here for years, waiting for a pirate crew that promised they would return after sailing the Grand Line. They never came back. That backstory hits harder than you might expect in a story filled with pirates and sea monsters, because suddenly, the adventure pauses long enough to talk about loneliness, about promises made across impossible distances. Luffy's reaction to the situation is pure Luffy. Instead of treating Laboon like an obstacle, he challenges the whale directly, climbs onto its head, punches it in the face, and declares a ridiculous rivalry between pirate captain and giant whale. It sounds absurd, but in the strange emotional logic of this world, it actually helps. By giving Laboon a new promise, one that involves meeting again after completing the Grand Line, Luffy transforms the whale's endless waiting into something hopeful. A new goal, another race toward the future. And that's one of the most important ideas in this story. Everyone in this world is chasing something. Dreams, revenge, freedom, treasure, redemption. The Grand Line pulls all of those ambitions into the same violent ocean. Once the crew sails past Laboon and deeper into the Grand Line, the tone of the season gradually begins shifting again. The waters grow even more unpredictable. Compasses start behaving strangely. Islands appear in places where maps insist nothing should exist. This isn't a normal sea. It's a place where the rules of the world seem slightly broken. And somewhere far away from the Going Merry, another group of people has started paying close attention to the Straw Hat Pirates. Marines studying bounty reports, pirate organizations noticing unusual activity, quiet conversations happening in dimly lit offices where maps of the Grand Line cover entire walls. The ripple effect of Luffy's actions is beginning to spread, which means the adventure isn't just getting bigger, it's getting dangerous. The deeper the Going Merry sails into the Grand Line, the more obvious it becomes that this ocean doesn't behave like any sea the crew has ever known. Currents shift without warning. The sky can change seasons within minutes, and even the compasses start spinning like they've completely lost their sense of direction. For someone like Nami, who built her entire life around navigation and precision, that chaos is both fascinating and terrifying. There's a moment where she's standing near the ship's railing at night, staring down at the compass needle shaking back and forth. It's the kind of quiet scene that reveals a lot about the tone of this season. The Grand Line isn't just physically dangerous, it messes with certainty itself. Nothing here follows predictable patterns, which is exactly why ships disappear in these waters. But the Straw Hats keep moving forward anyway. Not long after passing Laboon, the crew spots their first island inside the Grand Line. At first glance, it almost feels peaceful. Green hills, scattered buildings near a harbor, a calm shoreline that contrasts sharply with the violent seas they just crossed. The place looks welcoming enough that even Zoro lowers his guard slightly as they approach. This island is known as Whiskey Peak, and the show does something clever with the way it introduces this location. Instead of presenting it as hostile territory, the people of the town greet the crew like heroes. Music fills the streets, food is brought out, drinks are passed around freely. The townsfolk celebrate the arrival of pirates as if they've been waiting for them all day. That level of hospitality immediately raises suspicion. Roronoa Zoro notices it first. While the others enjoy the sudden celebration, he quietly studies the behavior of the locals. The smiles seem slightly forced. The cheers come a little too quickly. It's the kind of subtle unease that builds slowly in the background while everyone else is distracted. Luffy, of course, is completely thrilled by the situation. Free food, a party, and people cheering pirates? To him, this place feels like paradise. But as the night goes on, something underneath the celebration begins shifting. The camera moves through narrow streets where shadows stretch across the ground. A group of townspeople whisper near a stack of bounty posters. The names on those posters reveal something important about this island. It's a hunting ground for pirates. The citizens of Whiskey Peak aren't celebrating newcomers, they're sizing them up. And when the Straw Hats finally fall asleep after hours of food and music, the trap is triggered. Hundreds of bounty hunters suddenly emerge from the town's buildings, armed with swords, rifles, and ropes meant to capture pirates alive. The tone of the episode flips instantly from comedy to chaos, except one person is still awake: Zoro. What follows becomes one of the most intense fight sequences the series has attempted so far. Surrounded by an entire town full of bounty hunters, Zoro stands alone in the center of the street with his swords drawn. The choreography here is incredible because it leans into the character's calm confidence. He doesn't panic, he doesn't shout threats. He simply prepares to cut through every opponent standing in his way. And he does. The fight unfolds in waves. Groups of bounty hunters rushing forward only to be thrown back by precise sword strikes. Lanterns crashing to the ground as steel clashes under the moonlight. Zoro moving with that same controlled rhythm we saw earlier on the ship, except now the stakes are real. By the time the rest of the crew wakes up, the entire town square is filled with defeated bounty hunters scattered across the ground. It's a moment that reminds everyone, including the audience, that Zoro isn't just Luffy's loyal companion. He's one of the most dangerous swordsmen traveling these seas. But Whiskey Peak isn't just about that fight. The island also introduces a larger conspiracy slowly forming behind the scenes. Among the bounty hunters are agents connected to a mysterious organization operating across the Grand Line. Their mission isn't just capturing pirates. It's gathering information, manipulating conflicts, and maintaining influence over certain territories. That revelation begins pulling the Straw Hats into something bigger than random encounters. Because suddenly, the crew realizes they've stepped into a web of hidden power structures that control parts of the Grand Line. Criminal groups, corrupt officials, pirate alliances, marine forces, all operating within overlapping systems that ordinary travelers rarely understand. And the Straw Hats, whether they realize it or not, are about to disrupt those systems simply by continuing their journey. After leaving Whiskey Peak behind, the crew sets course toward another destination hinted at by Nami's strange compass readings. But this time, the voyage doesn't feel carefree anymore. The ocean seems heavier, as if the Grand Line itself is testing them. Storm clouds gather more frequently. Ships appear on the horizon only to vanish minutes later. At one point, the crew passes a wrecked pirate vessel floating half-submerged in the water, its sails shredded and its deck eerily empty. It's a visual reminder that survival here isn't guaranteed, yet Luffy remains unchanged. Standing at the front of the ship again, Straw Hat pulled low against the wind. He watches the horizon with the same excitement he had before entering the Grand Line. Because to him, every danger is simply another step closer to the ultimate goal, the legendary treasure known as One Piece. And somewhere out there in these unpredictable waters, the path toward that treasure is already beginning to unfold. And somewhere between those strange, violent stretches of ocean and the eerie calm that follows them, the Going Merry finally drifts toward the next island on Nami's unpredictable readings. A place that doesn't look dangerous at first glance, but immediately feels unusual. The shoreline is covered in thick jungle vegetation, rising into towering cliffs that look almost prehistoric. Mist rolls slowly through the trees, and there's this distant sound echoing across the island that nobody on the crew can quite identify. It's deep, rhythmic, almost like thunder, but not quite. This island is called Little Garden, and the moment the Straw Hats step onto the shore, the atmosphere shifts again. You can feel the scale of the Grand Line expanding right away. Massive trees stretch high enough to block out portions of the sky. The ground itself is uneven, shaped by ancient geological formations that suggest this place hasn't changed in thousands of years. Even the air feels thicker here, humid and heavy. But what really makes Little Garden strange is the wildlife. The first creature they encounter looks like something straight out of prehistory. A giant reptilian beast bursts through the jungle foliage with a roar that sends birds scattering into the sky. It takes the crew a second to process what they're seeing. Dinosaurs. Not fossils, not skeletons in a museum. Actual living dinosaurs roaming freely across the island. And this is one of those moments where the show leans fully into the bizarre imagination of Eiichiro Oda's world. Instead of explaining how such creatures survived, the story simply accepts it as part of the Grand Line's strange ecosystem. This sea contains islands where time itself seems to move differently. Luffy, of course, reacts the only way Luffy possibly could. He's thrilled. While the rest of the crew is trying to figure out how to survive on an island full of prehistoric predators, Luffy is already charging toward the jungle with a huge grin, excited to explore. That reckless enthusiasm creates a chain reaction of chaos almost immediately. Because Little Garden isn't just home to dinosaurs, it's also home to two warriors who have been fighting each other for a very, very long time. Deep inside the island's jungle, the crew eventually encounters two enormous figures clashing with weapons the size of ships. The ground trembles every time their blades collide. Trees snap like twigs as they move across the battlefield. These are giants. Specifically, two legendary warriors known as Dory and Broggy. Their duel has been going on for decades. Neither of them even remembers what the original argument was about anymore. The fight has simply become a matter of pride, honor, and tradition. Every day they meet at the center of the island to continue their endless battle, pausing only to rest and recover before starting again. And strangely, there's something admirable about it. The Straw Hats quickly realize these giants aren't villains. They're warriors bound by an ancient code that values strength, courage, and loyalty above everything else. Despite their constant fighting, they treat each other with deep respect. Luffy immediately admires them. To him, their endless duel represents something pure. Two warriors chasing strength simply because that's who they are. Watching them clash feels less like witnessing violence and more like seeing a ritual that's become part of the island itself. But Little Garden isn't peaceful for long. Because the mysterious organization hinted at earlier in the season has agents operating here as well. Hidden among the jungle paths and ancient ruins are members of a secretive group manipulating events across the Grand Line. They've been studying the giants, studying the Straw Hats, and most importantly, studying Luffy. What makes these antagonists interesting is how quiet their presence is. They don't immediately attack with overwhelming force. Instead, they create small disruptions, poisoning food supplies, sabotaging supplies, spreading misinformation among the crew, slowly turning the environment against them. At one point, Nami falls seriously ill after consuming contaminated water, which immediately raises the stakes for the entire journey. Suddenly, the crew isn't just exploring anymore. They're searching desperately for medical help somewhere in the Grand Line. And that introduces one of the biggest emotional threads of this season. Because the crew realizes something important during this crisis. They don't have a doctor. Up until now, they've been lucky. Minor injuries, manageable illnesses, nothing too serious. But the Grand Line doesn't operate on luck. Every island brings new dangers, and without someone who understands medicine, the crew is vulnerable in ways they hadn't considered before. That realization weighs heavily on everyone, especially Luffy. For someone who normally charges into danger without hesitation, seeing one of his friends weakened by illness hits differently. It's a reminder that being captain means more than chasing adventure. It means protecting the people who chose to follow you. Which is why the next destination becomes clear. There's an island somewhere ahead known for its medical expertise. A cold, mountainous place where skilled doctors live high above the snow. Drum Island. Reaching that island becomes the crew's urgent priority. But leaving Little Garden isn't simple either. The agents operating on the island finally reveal themselves in the final stretch of this arc, attempting to eliminate the Straw Hats before they can disrupt the organization's plans across the Grand Line. The confrontation is fast, messy, and dangerous. Dinosaurs crashing through the jungle, giants clashing nearby, explosions ripping through ancient ruins, and in the middle of it all, the Straw Hats fighting with everything they have just to escape the island alive. By the time the Going Merry finally sails away from Little Garden, the crew is exhausted. Nami is still recovering, supplies are running low. The weather is getting colder as they approach northern waters. Yet somehow, the mood on the ship feels stronger than before. Because every challenge they face keeps proving the same thing. This crew works. They fight for each other. They protect each other. And somewhere out there in the frozen mountains of Drum Island, the next chapter of their journey, and the next member of the Straw Hat crew, is already waiting. As the Going Merry approaches the icy northern reaches, the environment shifts dramatically, from the humid jungles of Little Garden to a frozen, wind-lashed landscape. Snowflakes swirl across the deck, frosting the wooden rails and making every movement treacherous. The contrast is stark, not just visually, but emotionally. After surviving dinosaurs, giant duels, and shadowy agents, the crew now faces nature itself as an adversary. The cold is relentless, biting at skin, seeping through clothing, and forcing them to adapt or risk serious consequences. Drum Island's arrival is cinematic in every sense. Massive peaks rise from the frozen plains like jagged teeth against a steel-gray sky. Icicles hang from cliff faces, shimmering in the weak northern sunlight. The music shifts too, moving from adventurous, playful tones to something heavier, almost somber. It's as if the world itself is warning them that the stakes here are entirely different from what they've faced before. Immediately, the crew senses that survival will depend on more than their usual skills. Nami struggles to maintain navigation through the blizzard, while Zoro adjusts to fighting on icy terrain, where every step can turn into disaster. Luffy, for all his reckless optimism, begins to realize that even his abilities have limits in such extreme conditions. The ocean may have tested their courage, but the mountains are testing their endurance. Their first encounter on Drum Island is with the locals, a secluded village of people who have learned to thrive despite the harsh environment. At first, the villagers are suspicious, their faces hard and wary. Years of isolation in a treacherous land have made them cautious of outsiders, especially pirates. But the Straw Hats' reputation and their earnest personalities slowly break down the walls. Nami's intelligence in reading the environment, Luffy's boundless optimism, and the crew's unshakable camaraderie make the villagers reconsider their initial judgment. Then comes a narrative shift that defines this arc: the search for a doctor. The villagers speak of a brilliant physician living at the summit of Drum Island, a place perilously high and difficult to reach. This doctor isn't just skilled. The legend around him paints him as almost mythical, capable of curing ailments no ordinary practitioner could. Nami's illness has become the catalyst for this quest, injecting real urgency into the narrative. Without immediate medical aid, the crew's journey could come to an abrupt, tragic halt. The climb to the doctor's residence is a sequence of both breathtaking visuals and character-driven drama. The Going Merry can't proceed far into the icy terrain, so the crew treks on foot. Snow drifts swirl around them, obscuring the path. Slopes are steep and treacherous, with the constant threat of avalanches. Here, the show excels at portraying teamwork. Each character contributes in their unique way. Zoro clears obstacles with strength and precision. Sanji scouts paths while protecting against icy gusts. And Luffy, ever the reckless, motivates the group with sheer enthusiasm, ensuring morale remains high. This arc also deepens character relationships organically. Moments of vulnerability abound. Nami clinging to Luffy when fatigue sets in. Zoro silently aiding Sanji when he slips. And Usopp expressing his fear while still pushing forward. These interactions highlight the emotional stakes in ways that blend seamlessly with the physical challenges. It's not just survival. It's trust, reliance, and the strengthening of bonds that define a crew capable of facing the Grand Line. Upon reaching the summit, the crew finally meets Dr. Hiluluk, whose presence is both commanding and deeply human. He's a man shaped by years of isolation, loss, and hope. The show takes its time exploring his backstory, allowing the audience to understand his philosophy on life, illness, and the fragile nature of human existence. His dialogue isn't merely exposition, it resonates emotionally, making the stakes of the season feel profoundly real. Nami's treatment under his care is a mix of medical realism and narrative flair, showing that the world, though fantastical, still has consequences for missteps and misfortune. However, Drum Island isn't purely a sanctuary. The season cleverly intertwines threat and safety. As Nami recovers, the organization manipulating events in the Grand Line resurfaces. Their agents have infiltrated the northern territories, seeking leverage against the Straw Hats. The crew faces ambushes, snowstorms designed to disorient, and even engineered ice traps that threaten to separate them. These sequences escalate tension while maintaining narrative cohesion, forcing the Straw Hats to use strategy, intelligence, and unity, rather than just brute strength. Amid these trials, individual character arcs shine. Sanji demonstrates ingenuity by crafting weapons and tools from limited resources. Usopp overcomes fear, showing bravery that surprises even himself. Luffy's leadership evolves. He learns to weigh risk against the welfare of his crew. And Zoro continues to embody the paradox of strength and restraint, proving that his power is as much about discipline as it is about raw force. By the end of the Drum Island arc, the crew has grown not just in skill, but in understanding. They've faced nature, solved survival challenges, navigated social dynamics, and confronted threats from both the environment and human adversaries. Nami's recovery marks a turning point, symbolizing resilience and hope. The season uses her illness and the quest for the doctor as a lens to explore broader themes: the cost of adventure, the necessity of trust, and the undeniable weight of responsibility that comes with leadership. And yet, the narrative teases what lies ahead. From the icy peaks, distant islands are glimpsed on the horizon, shrouded in mist and promise. The ocean beyond Drum Island is vast and unknown, hinting at dangers and wonders far greater than anything the Straw Hats have faced. Every lesson, every struggle, and every small victory here lays the groundwork for even more ambitious arcs to come. The season balances spectacle with emotion, world building with intimate character moments, and chaos with clarity, ensuring that the audience feels both awe and attachment. By the time the Going Merry leaves Drum Island behind, it's clear that the story of One Piece Season 2 isn't just about the adventure itself. It's about how a group of individuals, each with their own flaws and dreams, becomes a family capable of confronting the unpredictable vastness of the Grand Line. Every obstacle, be it a monstrous creature, a cunning adversary, or the raw power of nature, serves to reinforce this central truth. Together, the Straw Hats are unstoppable. Their journey is no longer just a personal quest. It has become a legend in the making, with each episode layering depth, danger, and heart onto the sprawling tapestry of this fantastical world. And even as the Going Merry sails away from the snowbound cliffs of Drum Island, the story continues to evolve in ways that feel both inevitable and surprising. The season doesn't let the crew, or the audience, rest for long. The Grand Line, after all, is designed to challenge every assumption a pirate can make, and the Straw Hats are only beginning to understand the true scale of what they're up against. The narrative cleverly transitions from the harsh extremes of northern landscapes to subtropical islands that seem peaceful on the surface, yet hide dangers beneath their colorful facades. It's a storytelling rhythm that mirrors the unpredictability of the ocean itself. Moments of calm, followed by sudden, almost violent chaos. This part of the season introduces a new layer to the Grand Line's ecosystem: rival pirate crews. Unlike the Straw Hats, many of these crews are highly organized, with strict hierarchies and goals that intersect with Luffy's quest for One Piece. Their introductions are handled with remarkable subtlety in the show. Instead of immediately engaging in full-blown conflict, these rival crews are often glimpsed in the background. Ships moving against the horizon, signals exchanged from distant vantage points, and subtle reconnaissance that hints at more complex political dynamics at play. The series does a fantastic job of showing that the world is alive, with multiple stories unfolding simultaneously, giving the Grand Line a lived-in, organic feel. One of the most striking elements in this section is how the show portrays strategy and intelligence. Nami, for instance, emerges as an indispensable tactician. The subtropical islands present a series of environmental puzzles, hidden reefs, volatile weather patterns, and locals with conflicting agendas. Her maps, intuition, and quick thinking are highlighted more than ever, reinforcing her role not just as a navigator, but as the crew's cerebral anchor. These sequences often unfold with a quiet tension, where a single miscalculation could mean disaster for the Going Merry and its passengers. The show allows these moments to breathe, giving weight to decisions that might otherwise feel minor in less careful storytelling. Meanwhile, Luffy's leadership begins to take on deeper nuance. While his approach remains impulsive and often reckless, Season 2 emphasizes how his optimism and decisiveness inspire loyalty and courage among the crew. There are subtle moments where he listens, adjusts, and even steps back when necessary, a marked evolution from the relatively naive leader of the first season. His interactions with other pirate captains also begin to reflect his growing reputation. Some view him as a threat, others as an enigma, and the show captures this duality brilliantly, highlighting that power in the Grand Line is as much about perception as it is about actual strength. The stakes escalate further with the introduction of marine patrols, whose presence is far more pronounced than in the first season. These aren't background antagonists, they're fully fleshed out forces with tactical acumen, capable of orchestrating ambushes and blockades. The show uses these encounters to create tension without relying solely on combat spectacle. Naval maneuvering, intelligence gathering, and calculated retreats all play a part, reinforcing the notion that survival in the Grand Line requires more than strength. It requires adaptability, awareness, and sometimes sheer cunning. Amid these threats, the season also gives room for exploration of the islands themselves. Each location offers unique cultural, historical, and environmental textures. From bustling port towns where trade and intrigue intersect, to remote villages where ancient traditions persist, the show emphasizes that the world beyond the sea is as richly detailed as the oceans they traverse. These sequences aren't filler. They provide context for the social, political, and economic forces shaping the Grand Line, reminding viewers that Luffy's adventures exist within a fully realized universe. Character dynamics continue to deepen in this arc. Moments of vulnerability and humor balance the high-stakes action. Usopp's fear is juxtaposed with ingenuity. Sanji's flirtatious bravado masks strategic brilliance. And Chopper begins to hint at the medical expertise that will later become indispensable. Even minor characters introduced in passing leave lasting impressions, often serving as narrative catalysts or moral mirrors for the crew. The season excels at blending these micro-interactions with macro-scale adventure, ensuring that the story never feels one-dimensional. Another layer that distinguishes this stretch of the season is the creative use of the Grand Line's unpredictable physics. Weather anomalies, ocean currents, and natural disasters aren't just backdrop, they actively influence the plot. A seemingly minor storm can strand the crew on a mysterious island, while unusual tides might reveal hidden coves or ancient ruins. The production design, visual effects, and sound work in tandem to make these elements feel tangible. And the crew's responses to these phenomena reinforce the ongoing theme that the world itself is an active character. As these islands and encounters accumulate, the narrative carefully seeds long-term arcs. Foreshadowing of major antagonists, hints about the true nature of the Grand Line, and the subtle unraveling of the shadowy organization all coalesce to create a sense of looming inevitability. The crew's journey is not merely episodic. It's a layered progression where each challenge builds on the last, preparing both characters and viewers for climactic confrontations yet to come. By the end of this portion of the season, the Straw Hats have grown significantly. They've faced environmental extremes, navigated complex social structures, battled rival crews, and outmaneuvered Marines. Each obstacle has tested a different facet of their abilities and cohesion as a unit. The Going Merry has survived the Grand Line's initial trials, but the ocean's vastness and unpredictability remain ever present. The narrative consistently reinforces that adventure, danger, and discovery are inseparable on this journey, a principle that has defined One Piece from the very beginning. Even in quieter moments, the season's emotional resonance shines. Scenes of camaraderie, laughter, and reflection contrast sharply with the peril surrounding them, reminding the audience that these characters aren't just adventurers. They're friends, family, and survivors of a world where every decision carries weight. These emotional beats are interwoven seamlessly with action, ensuring that the story never sacrifices depth for spectacle. By the time the season reaches its midpoint, it's clear that One Piece Season 2, 2026, has elevated the live-action adaptation beyond mere novelty. The show is no longer just about translating a beloved manga. It's about expanding, refining, and deepening the narrative in ways that honor the source material while embracing the possibilities of live-action storytelling. Every island, storm, battle, and conversation is part of a larger mosaic, setting the stage for conflicts, revelations, and triumphs that will define the remainder of the Grand Line journey. And in that way, the season continues to live up to the promise teased in its trailer, a bold, expansive, and deeply human adventure that captures both the imagination and the heart of its audience. As the Going Merry pushes further into the Grand Line, the show begins to emphasize one of its most compelling aspects, the unpredictable nature of the ocean, and how it mirrors the unpredictability of the crew's journey. Even after surviving dinosaurs, giant warriors, icy mountains, and rival pirate crews, the Straw Hats are reminded that the sea itself is an active adversary. Massive waves rise without warning, violent currents spin ships around, and the sky often erupts in sudden storms. Unlike traditional adventure shows where geography feels static, the Grand Line is portrayed almost like a living entity, shaping the narrative as much as the characters themselves. One particularly striking sequence early in this leg of the season shows the crew navigating a chain of islands that seems serene at first glance, only to reveal deadly traps hidden within their landscapes. The camera lingers on minute details, treacherous cliffs that crumble underfoot, sudden geysers that explode from the earth, and flora that appears harmless but can ensnare or poison the unwary. The production design and cinematography excel here, making each environment feel dangerous yet wondrous, reinforcing the theme that beauty and danger are inseparable in this world. The season also deepens its exploration of antagonistic forces. While earlier arcs introduced shadowy agents and rival pirate crews, this portion expands on their motivations and methods. Rather than facing one-dimensional villains, the Straw Hats confront adversaries with nuanced personalities, strategic minds, and moral complexities. For instance, a rival pirate captain encountered on these islands is portrayed not as purely evil, but as someone who values loyalty and honor, albeit through a ruthless lens. This blurring of moral lines adds tension and keeps the audience invested because victory cannot be achieved solely through strength. Strategy, negotiation, and understanding are equally essential. Character development continues to be a highlight. Nami's mastery of navigation is showcased in increasingly high-stakes scenarios, illustrating her growth from someone who initially relied on luck and instinct to a strategic thinker capable of guiding the crew through nearly impossible conditions. Zoro's combat skills evolve in response to unpredictable terrains and foes, emphasizing his adaptability and discipline. Sanji's creativity in using the environment to his advantage, Chopper's medical interventions under extreme circumstances, and Usopp's growing courage all intertwine to create a narrative where each member's unique abilities are integral to survival. The season does not shy away from moments of vulnerability, which adds emotional weight to the adventure. There are scenes of exhaustion, self-doubt, and fear, moments where characters question their decisions or worry for one another. These are often juxtaposed with moments of levity. Luffy's infectious optimism, Sanji's humorous flirtations, or Usopp's exaggerated tales of bravery. This balance ensures that the story remains grounded emotionally, preventing the high-octane action from overshadowing character dynamics. Midway through this segment, the Straw Hats encounter an island with an unusual phenomenon, a natural labyrinth formed by enormous rock formations and shifting sand patterns. The maze-like terrain serves both as a visual spectacle and as a narrative device to test the crew's problem-solving abilities. Here, the show highlights teamwork and ingenuity. Nami deciphers subtle clues in the environment, Luffy takes physical risks to clear obstacles, and Zoro and Sanji use brute force when necessary. The sequence reinforces that survival in the Grand Line requires a combination of brains, brawn, and collaboration. As the season progresses, hints about overarching storylines emerge. Foreshadowing of powerful enemies, hidden conspiracies, and secrets of the Grand Line are sprinkled throughout, building anticipation for climactic confrontations. The organization introduced earlier continues to operate from the shadows, influencing events in ways that suggest the Straw Hats' journey is part of a much larger struggle for control over the seas. This creates a sense of continuity and scale, reminding viewers that every encounter, no matter how small, has potential long-term consequences. Another compelling element is the show's handling of the sea's unpredictability in combat sequences. Battles are not merely displays of power. They integrate environmental hazards, shifting tides, and weather effects, making every fight dynamic and unique. For example, a skirmish on a storm-lashed coastline demonstrates how characters adapt their techniques to avoid collapsing cliffs, rising tides, and powerful gusts of wind. The result is action that feels both grounded and cinematic, emphasizing skill, strategy, and improvisation over sheer spectacle. At the same time, humor and character interplay remain central. Lighthearted exchanges, playful rivalries, and moments of absurdity are seamlessly woven into intense situations, reflecting the tone of the original manga, while adapting naturally to live-action storytelling. Luffy's unpredictable antics, Sanji's flirtations, Zoro's stoicism, and Usopp's exaggerated fears serve as relief from tension while reinforcing the individuality of each crew member. By the end of this portion of the season, the narrative has successfully balanced world-building, character development, and escalating stakes. The Straw Hats are no longer naive adventurers. They are experienced sailors navigating an unpredictable ocean filled with powerful allies, cunning rivals, and hidden dangers. The show continuously reinforces that success in the Grand Line requires adaptability, teamwork, and courage, a theme that resonates through both action sequences and quieter, character-driven moments. Overall, this section establishes the foundation for even greater challenges ahead. The crew's growth, the expansion of the world, and the introduction of complex adversaries all converge to set the stage for the next phase of the journey. With every wave they ride, every island they explore, and every adversary they confront, the Straw Hats edge closer to the ultimate goal. Not just survival, but the realization of their dreams and the continued shaping of their legend in the vast, unpredictable world of the Grand Line. As the Going Merry continues to carve its path through the Grand Line, the season gradually shifts its focus toward the psychological and emotional toll of the journey. By now, the crew has faced natural disasters, rival pirates, shadowy organizations, and impossible terrain, and the narrative takes the opportunity to explore how such relentless pressure shapes them. Unlike the earlier episodes, where external threats dominate the action, these moments center on introspection, camaraderie, and the quiet fears that simmer beneath their bravado. It's a narrative choice that feels deliberate. After all, a true adventure is as much about internal growth as it is about external conquest. One of the most poignant sequences occurs during a long night at sea. The ship drifts under a sky blanketed with stars, and the gentle rocking of the ocean contrasts sharply with the chaos of previous arcs. Luffy sits at the bow, staring out at the horizon in a rare moment of stillness. For someone usually defined by reckless energy, this scene is surprisingly introspective. He talks with Zoro and Sanji about their dreams, their fears, and what it means to lead a crew through uncharted waters. These conversations are quiet, intimate, and layered with subtext, reminding viewers that leadership, trust, and loyalty are constantly being tested, even when no immediate danger is present. The subtropical islands encountered afterward provide a clever narrative counterpoint. They seem idyllic at first, with lush vegetation, bustling marketplaces, and vibrant cultures that seem untouched by the chaos of the Grand Line. Yet, the crew quickly learns that appearances are deceptive. Beneath the picturesque surface lie political tensions, rival factions, and islands whose geography can shift unpredictably due to tidal and seismic activity. The show uses these environments to keep the audience engaged, emphasizing that no location in the Grand Line is truly safe, and that vigilance must be constant. During these episodes, Nami's navigation skills are showcased more than ever. She interprets shifting weather patterns, tidal anomalies, and celestial cues to plot courses that are not only efficient, but strategically sound in the face of both natural and human threats. Her growth is evident. She moves with confidence, makes decisions under extreme pressure, and even begins to anticipate adversaries' moves before they strike. This evolution is mirrored in the trust the crew places in her. Luffy relies on her judgment implicitly, and the dynamic between them is strengthened by mutual respect and shared responsibility. Meanwhile, rival pirate crews and marine forces continue to challenge the Straw Hats in increasingly sophisticated ways. Ambushes are planned with intelligence and precision. Environmental hazards are exploited to maximum effect, and the antagonist's motives are revealed to be multifaceted. These conflicts demonstrate that the world of the Grand Line is complex. Power is rarely absolute, and morality is often ambiguous. The show thrives in this gray space, balancing thrilling action sequences with strategic depth and ethical tension. The season also introduces fleeting encounters with mythical creatures of the Grand Line, each of which reinforces the sense that this world operates on its own rules. From massive sea beasts that challenge the ship's stability, to rare flora that defy logic, these elements are integrated seamlessly into both narrative and visual design. They are never gratuitous. Instead, they emphasize the unpredictability and majesty of the Grand Line, underscoring that adventure in this world demands creativity, courage, and adaptability. Character interactions continue to evolve organically. Usopp's courage grows incrementally, often in moments that combine humor with genuine bravery. Sanji's ingenuity in combat and problem-solving is highlighted, particularly when environmental hazards force him to improvise solutions under pressure. Chopper's medical expertise becomes indispensable, and moments where he provides care reinforce both his technical skills and the emotional bonds that tie the crew together. Even minor characters introduced throughout these arcs serve to test or reflect the Straw Hats' values, emphasizing themes of loyalty, friendship, and resilience. The narrative pacing is deliberate yet engaging. High-stakes sequences are interspersed with quieter, reflective moments, allowing tension to ebb and flow naturally. This rhythm ensures that viewers remain invested in both the action and the character's development, while also providing breathing room for the world-building elements to shine. Each island, storm, and confrontation adds layers to the Grand Line's complexity, reinforcing that the Straw Hats' journey is part of a vast, interconnected ecosystem of adventure, danger, and discovery. By the later episodes of this segment, the crew begins to recognize patterns in the Grand Line that hint at larger story arcs, hints of formidable antagonists, unexplored islands with mysterious resources, and the subtle machinations of the secret organization converge to create a sense of impending confrontation. The show plants these seeds carefully, balancing foreshadowing with immediate narrative payoff, ensuring that tension is maintained without overwhelming the audience with exposition. In the climax of this portion of the season, the crew faces a multi-layered challenge, a combination of natural hazards, rival pirates, and environmental puzzles that test every skill they have developed so far. The sequence is tense, visually dynamic, and emotionally resonant. Each member of the Straw Hats contributes uniquely, showcasing teamwork, ingenuity, and personal growth. The resolution reinforces a central theme of the series. In the unpredictable world of the Grand Line, unity, trust, and courage are the greatest assets a crew can possess. By the end of this arc, the Straw Hats have not only survived, but evolved. They have learned to navigate the Grand Line's physical and moral complexities, faced dangers that test their limits, and deepened the bonds that make them more than just a group of adventurers. They are a family. The Going Merry sails onward, battered yet unbroken, carrying a crew whose experiences have prepared them for the even greater challenges awaiting further into the Grand Line. Each obstacle, each discovery, and each encounter has reinforced that this journey is not just about chasing treasure, but about growth, loyalty, and the relentless pursuit of dreams in a world where nothing is predictable. Okay, so let me ask you something, and I want you to really think about this before you just scroll past. When was the last time, and I mean the last time, that you watched a live-action adaptation of something you genuinely loved, something you'd grown up with or binged obsessively, and you walked away thinking, yeah, they actually got it. They didn't ruin it. They didn't turn it into some corporate, watered-down version of itself. They didn't cast someone completely wrong. They didn't strip out all the soul. They didn't turn three-dimensional characters into walking punchlines. When was the last time that happened? Because for most of us, and I'm being completely honest here, that answer is almost never. Almost never. We've been burned so many times that at some point, most fans of manga and anime just stopped expecting anything. We built this wall, right? This emotional defense mechanism, where we'd see a trailer for a new live-action adaptation, and we'd think, okay, here we go. Let me just brace myself. And 99 times out of 100, that skepticism turned out to be totally justified. Then in August of 2023, Netflix dropped One Piece Season 1 on a largely unsuspecting world. And something weird happened. Something almost nobody predicted. People watched it, fans and total newcomers alike, and they didn't hate it. They loved it. The reviews were strong. The Rotten Tomatoes score was strong. The viewership numbers were genuinely massive. And the anime community, which is historically and correctly one of the most protective fan bases on the planet, looked at it and mostly said, you know what? This actually works. That's not nothing. That's a massive deal. Because One Piece, if you don't know, and if you don't, welcome, genuinely welcome, because you're about to learn why people lose their minds over this franchise. One Piece isn't just popular, it's the best-selling manga series in history. Over 516 million copies in circulation worldwide as of the time we're recording this. 26 years of weekly serialization by Eiichiro Oda, a man who has been running a fictional universe for longer than a lot of the people watching this video have been alive. And somehow, every arc, every island, every character just keeps landing. That is an absurd creative achievement. And the live-action team, led by Netflix and showrunner Matt Owens, along with Oda himself, managed to bottle some of that magic in Season 1. So the question that's been hanging in the air since that first season wrapped, since that gorgeous ending shot of the Going Merry pointed toward the horizon and the crew finally fully assembled. The question has been, can they do it again? Can they pull it off twice? Because Season 1 had the benefit of surprise. Nobody expected it to be good. The bar was underground. Season 2 has to clear a real bar now. And not just a real bar, it has to clear a bar while tackling some of the most beloved and most emotionally complex source material in the entire first half of Oda's story. And here's the thing. Here's what's been killing me since they announced it. Season 2 is subtitled Into the Grand Line, which means this season isn't just continuing the adventure, it's fundamentally changing the scale and the nature of everything. The East Blue felt grounded. It felt like a coming-of-age adventure, albeit one with rubber-limbed protagonists and fishmen and impossible swords. The Grand Line is something else entirely. The Grand Line is where One Piece becomes One Piece, where the islands get strange and impossible and beautiful, where the villains stop being pirate thugs and start being warlords and ideologues and genuine forces of political power, where the story, underneath all the spectacle and the humor and the incredible fight choreography, starts revealing itself as something far deeper and more emotionally resonant than you initially signed up for. So yeah, this is the review I've been waiting to write, and I'm going to take my time with it because this season deserves that. Not rushed, not just a quick thumbs up or thumbs down. I want to actually walk through what this thing is, where it came from, what it's doing, whether it pulls it off, and why I think, with some real specific caveats, this show is doing something genuinely important in the landscape of television right now. But before we get into any of that, let me talk about the trailer, because the trailer for Season 2 was something else, and it tells you a lot about what the show is trying to accomplish this year. So when Netflix dropped that first teaser, not the full trailer, the teaser, the thing that hit me immediately was the color. Just the sheer visual palette of it. Season 1 was gorgeous, don't get me wrong, but it felt warm and somewhat familiar. Pirates, ocean, sunsets, tropical ports. There was a real swashbuckling, classic adventure feeling to a lot of it. The teaser for Season 2 opens with this sense of dislocation. You're watching the Going Merry sailing through weather that doesn't make sense. The sky is doing something it shouldn't. The water is wrong in a way that's hard to articulate. And that's deliberate. That's the Grand Line. That's them immediately establishing that the rules of the world have changed. The natural world has become unreliable. And that's terrifying and beautiful at the same time. Then you get your first actual look at the crew back together. Luffy, Zoro, Nami, Usopp, Sanji. And there's this split second where I'm watching Iñaki Godoy as Luffy, and I'm thinking, man, he just is this character now, isn't he? There was something about Season 1 where you could still see the seams a little, where you'd think, okay, that's a person playing Luffy. By the time they shot Season 2, which filmed between June and December of 2024 down in South Africa, Cape Town specifically, by that point, the cast had settled into these roles in a way that shows in every single frame of the trailer. Iñaki doesn't look like he's performing Luffy anymore. He just looks like Luffy. The physicality, the way he holds himself, the grin, the complete and total absence of self-consciousness. It's remarkable. The trailer then starts cycling through locations, and this is where it gets genuinely exciting for anyone who knows the source material. You see Logtown, this gorgeous, slightly weathered port town with that weight of history hanging over it. Because Logtown is where the Pirate King Gol D. Roger was executed. It's where everything started, and in a very real narrative sense, it's where Luffy's journey is supposed to end, either in the same square where Roger died or in glory. The production design on Logtown looked incredible. It had this feel of a place that understood its own significance, if that makes sense. Streets worn smooth, buildings that had witnessed something enormous. You can see the execution platform in the background of one shot, and it just sits there, almost casual, saying everything without saying anything. Then you get Little Garden, and this is the moment the trailer made me genuinely excited. Because Little Garden in the source material is one of those locations that sounds insane on paper, and is even more insane in practice. It's a prehistoric island. And I don't mean that metaphorically or stylistically. I mean, there are actual dinosaurs walking around on it. The whole island is frozen in time, geologically and ecologically, in a way that the Grand Line just casually allows. And the production design team apparently built real physical sets for this environment, which you can see in the texture of the shots. There's foliage that looks dense and ancient, and there's a scale to the thing that's hard to fake. You can see what appears to be one of the giant warriors, Dory or Broggy, in the background of a wide shot, and the scale work they've done is impressive in a way that the first season's CGI work sometimes struggled with. And then there's the moment the trailer pivots toward, the thing they were clearly building to, which is the appearance of Tony Chopper. Now look, I knew this was coming. Every fan knew this was coming. Chopper has been one of the most discussed casting and production challenges of the entire live-action series, because Chopper is a talking reindeer who ate a devil fruit that allows him to transform, and he has one of the most emotionally devastating backstories in the entire series. Making that work in live action without it looking ridiculous is a genuinely hard problem, and from what the trailer showed, they solved it. The character design for live-action Chopper, voiced by Michaela Hoover, who you might know from Beef or the Guardians of the Galaxy films, looks genuinely wonderful. He's not photorealistic in a way that would feel jarring. He's slightly stylized, slightly warm, and the voice work in the trailer gave me exactly the right emotional frequency. The scene they cut to in the trailer where Chopper is standing in the snow on Drum Island, this tiny blue-nosed reindeer in the middle of this vast white landscape, while the score swells underneath it. That was a deliberate, calculated, emotional gut punch, and it worked on me completely. You also get glimpses of the new villains this season, and this is where the casting choices get really interesting. Joe Manganiello as Sir Crocodile, Mr. Zero, the warlord of the sea and the shadowy architect of everything terrible that's about to happen to Alabasta. That choice makes a lot of sense. Manganiello has a quality that Crocodile requires. Crocodile isn't a bruiser. He's not a fighter in the way that most One Piece antagonists are. He's a chess player. He's someone who moves pieces across a board from a comfortable distance. Someone who's built a legitimate-seeming criminal empire with layers of deniability. Manganiello has the physical presence to sell the threat, but he also has a particular kind of cold intelligence that comes across in the trailer shots of him. He's dressed impeccably, smoking a cigar, and there's this absolute stillness to him that reads as genuinely dangerous. David Dastmalchian as Mr. 3 is a delicious piece of casting. Dastmalchian is one of those character actors who seems biologically unable to give a bad performance. He's been extraordinary in everything from Ant-Man to The Suicide Squad to Dune. And Mr. 3, who possesses a devil fruit power that lets him control wax, is the kind of theatrical, slightly unhinged villain that Dastmalchian was basically born to play. In the trailer, you get maybe 2 seconds of him, but those 2 seconds have an energy. He's wearing what looks like an artist's smock. There are candles everywhere, and his expression is exactly the right combination of genuine menace and absurd theatricality. I cannot wait to watch an extended scene with him. Charithra Chandran as Vivi, as Princess Nefertari Vivi, undercover agent Miss Wednesday, is the new cast addition I'm most curious about because Vivi's story is arguably the emotional center of everything Season 2 is setting up. She's not just a princess needing rescue. She's a young woman who went undercover inside a criminal organization to save her kingdom, who has risked her life repeatedly before Luffy and the crew even show up, and who becomes this crucial moral and emotional counterweight to Luffy's more instinctive, forward-charging heroism. Getting that character right matters enormously. Chandran, known from Bridgerton, has a particular quality of warmth combined with visible intelligence that comes across in her brief trailer appearances. There's a scene where she's standing face-to-face with the crew, and you can see the calculation behind her eyes, the weight of what she's carrying. And that's exactly what Vivi needs to be. Katie Sagal as Dr. Kureha is the kind of casting that just makes you laugh with how right it is. If you know Katie Seagal from Sons of Anarchy, you already understand why putting her in the role of this fierce, formidable, slightly terrifying, but ultimately deep-hearted doctor is perfect. Dr. Kureha is prickly and aggressive and protective in a way that is uniquely her own, and Seagal has been doing that for years. The trailer gives you a single shot of her striding through a snow-covered landscape looking like she owns the weather itself. Fantastic. And then there's the larger structural question the trailer raises, which is, how do you hold all of this together? Because Season 2 is covering 5 distinct arcs: Logtown, Reverse Mountain, Whiskey Peak, Little Garden, and Drum Island, in 8 episodes. That's a staggering amount of narrative ground to cover. Season 1 had the benefit of covering a slightly more linear story. Season 2 is essentially asking you to absorb 5 tonally different adventures, each of which introduces new characters, new concepts, new locations, and new emotional stakes, while somehow maintaining the feeling that this is one continuous journey, rather than a series of disconnected episodes. The trailer suggests they've found a structural through line in the Baroque Works conspiracy, in Vivi and the Shadow of Alabasta, in the growing presence of Crocodile. Everything feeds into that central thread. The individual island adventures feel less like detours and more like chapters in a single investigation, if that makes sense. The music in the trailer is also worth mentioning because it's doing something interesting. The show has always had a strong musical identity. The score from the first season, blending that sort of classical adventure sound with more unconventional moments, was genuinely one of the things I think got underappreciated. In the Season 2 trailer, there's this piece called Pray to the Sun, featuring Declan Debara and The Hue, which is a Mongolian folk metal band. And the combination is unexpected and surprisingly affecting. The Hue doing one piece feels bizarre on paper, and somehow completely natural in context, because the show has always been willing to reach for weird, unexpected emotional registers. And that musical combination captures the Grand Line's essential quality of being simultaneously ancient and wild and dangerous and beautiful. What the trailer is really selling, underneath all the spectacle and the character reveals, is the feeling of scale. Season 1 felt like an incredible adventure story. Season 2 is starting to feel like an epic, and there's a difference. An adventure is personal. It's about people you love doing things that are dangerous and exciting and emotionally resonant. An epic is personal too, but it's also about the world, about the stakes that exist beyond the individual characters, about the forces of power and history and politics that the characters are moving through and against. The Grand Line isn't just a setting change, it's a declaration that this story has grown up into something larger than itself. And if Season 2 makes good on what that trailer is promising, what we're watching isn't just a successful live-action adaptation of a beloved manga. We're watching the beginning of something that could genuinely stand on its own as one of the defining fantasy epics of this decade. And I know that's a big statement, I know. We're going to test it. We're going to pull this thing apart and see if it holds up. But that's what this channel does, and that's exactly what I intend to do with the next couple of hours of your time. Stick with me, because the story we're about to walk through is worth every minute. Alright, so let's actually get into the meat of this thing. And I want to do this properly because the story of Season 2, the actual narrative arc, the emotional journey, what's happening and why it matters, deserves more than a surface-level summary. I'm going to walk you through everything, every island, every character, every major plot movement, and I want to do it in a way where even if you've never read the manga, never watched the anime, never touched a single piece of One Piece media in your life, you walk away from this section understanding not just what happens, but why it matters. Why any of it matters. Because that's the thing about Oda's writing that gets lost sometimes in the sheer spectacle of the world he's built. Underneath all the devil fruits and sea monsters and impossible geography, this is a story about people. Deeply, specifically, carefully constructed people. And Season 2 is where that starts to become undeniable. So let's back up for just a second because context matters here. At the end of Season 1, we left Monkey D. Luffy and his crew, Roronoa Zoro, Nami, Usopp, and Sanji, sailing away from the East Blue with the Going Merry pointed toward the Grand Line. They had beaten Arlong. They had freed Nami's village. They had assembled a crew that genuinely works, that has chemistry, that cares about each other in the specific and unguarded way that Luffy tends to inspire in people just by being completely, unreservedly himself. And there was something genuinely moving about that ending. This group of misfits and dreamers and deeply wounded people sailing together towards something enormous and unknown. And you're rooting for all of them so hard it almost hurts. But Season 1, for all its greatness, was essentially a prologue. The East Blue, the sea where Luffy recruits his initial crew, where he beats his first major pirates, where the story establishes itself, is canonically considered the weakest of the four seas. The training wheels of the One Piece world. I mean that affectionately, not dismissively. It's where the audience learns the rules. It's where we learn who Luffy is, what he values, how he makes decisions, what his crew means to him. But it's also the safe side of the beginning. The Grand Line is where the real story starts, and Season 2 wastes absolutely no time making that clear. The season opens in Logtown, and Logtown is a location that carries an enormous amount of narrative and thematic weight before a single scene plays out, because of what it represents in the world of One Piece. This is the town of the beginning and the end. Gol D. Roger, the Pirate King, the man whose death speech ignited the great age of pirates, the man whose treasure somewhere on the Grand Line is the One Piece itself, was born here and was executed here. And the execution platform where he died still stands in the center of town. It's not a ruin. It's not a monument, exactly. It's just there, present. A piece of civic furniture that the entire world has organized itself around the memory of. Roger stood on that platform 22 years before this story begins, and in front of an enormous crowd, before they could cut off his head, he laughed. He laughed and he told the world that his treasure was out there, that it was real, that anyone who could find it could have it. And that one statement, that one laugh, changed everything. It created the very age of piracy that Luffy was born into. The age that made Luffy's dream possible in the first place. So when Luffy arrives in Logtown, walking through those streets toward the execution platform, there is a moment, and the live action handles this with real care, where he's standing in the same place where the entire world he's chasing was born, where the man whose hat he's wearing, whose dream he's inherited, stood and laughed and changed history. And Luffy doesn't make it complicated. He doesn't philosophize about it, doesn't have some elaborate internal monologue about legacy and meaning. He just stands there, grinning, completely present. And you understand in that moment everything you need to understand about who Luffy is. He doesn't feel the weight of this place as burden. He feels it as invitation, as fuel, as the starting gun of something that was always meant to happen. The episode wastes no time establishing that this brief pit stop in Logtown is not going to be without complications. The Marines have tracked the crew's movements, and two significant figures are introduced here that set the tone for Season 2's relationship with the world government and the Navy. Smoker. Captain Smoker, devil fruit user, a man who has eaten the smoke fruit and can turn his body into smoke, making him functionally immune to most physical attacks, is the Marine officer stationed in Logtown, and he is immediately, palpably different from the Marine antagonists we've seen before. Helmeppo and Kobe from Season 1 were either comedic or sympathetic, depending on the moment. Morgan was a corrupt bully. Garp was a complicated but ultimately understandable figure. Smoker is something else. He's not corrupt. He's not stupid. He's not blustering. He's genuinely deeply committed to his own sense of justice, which happens to run directly counter to Luffy's existence. The casting here. The live-action show has chosen someone with that particular quality of intensity that isn't aggression exactly. It's more like absolute certainty. Smoker is certain about everything, about what the law is, about what pirates are, about what his job demands of him. And that certainty makes him more frightening than a character who's just angry. His dynamic with Luffy starts here in a way that sets up something that the show will pay off much later. Because Smoker and Luffy's relationship is one of the more interesting antagonist pairings in the series. Smoker isn't trying to kill Luffy, he's trying to capture him. There's a distinction. And he's smart enough to recognize that Luffy is different from the pirates he normally encounters. Not better necessarily. Smoker doesn't grade pirates on a scale of decency, but different. More real somehow. More genuine in his stated intentions. And that genuineness irritates Smoker in a particular way, because it doesn't fit his model of what pirates are supposed to be. Alongside Smoker is his subordinate, Tashigi, a Marine sergeant who is essentially the physical and emotional mirror image of Zoro, in a way that's almost cosmically unfair to both of them. She looks like Kuina, the girl Zoro made his promise to, the girl whose death gave Zoro his dual dream. Tashigi is a swordswoman who is passionate about proper swords being used with honor, who is earnest and capable, but also genuinely tormented by the fact that she can't seem to win against the pirates she most wants to defeat. Her first real interaction with Zoro is one of those quietly devastating things that the show does beautifully. Two people who are clearly connected by something neither of them can name, facing each other across an ideological divide that neither is willing to cross. Zoro doesn't hurt her. He can't. Not really. And she can't figure out why this infuriates her so much. The Logtown section of the season also introduces the buggy problem in a way that is both funny and genuinely tense, which is one of those tone-balancing acts that Season 1 demonstrated the show can actually do. Buggy the Clown, who you might remember from Season 1 as the flamboyant, fragmented, charismatic, and absolutely unhinged pirate who gave Luffy his first real fight as a captain, has escaped from where we last saw him and is in Logtown. And he has developed what can only be described as a very personal interest in being the one to execute Luffy before the Grand Line. There's a callback here to the Roger execution platform that is so perfectly constructed narratively that even if you know it's coming, it still lands. Luffy ends up on the platform, not under arrest. This is Luffy. Arrest isn't really in his vocabulary. But standing there voluntarily, looking out over the crowd below, and Buggy appears and it's all about to go very badly, and then the weather intervenes in a way that feels like the universe itself has a sense of humor. A lightning bolt. A perfectly timed, absurdly dramatic lightning bolt. And Luffy just walks away grinning, because of course he does. But the real weight of Logtown, the emotional depth that the live action is clearly building toward, is what happens at the red-haired Shanks' bar. We don't see Shanks in these scenes. Shanks is playing a much longer game than a Season 2 appearance would suggest. But his presence is felt throughout Logtown in a way that grounds Luffy's dream in the specific and personal, rather than the abstract. A barkeeper who knew Shanks. A hat that has history. A moment where Luffy isn't the future pirate king, or the rubber-limbed fighter who's beaten Arlong and Crocodile and everyone else. He's just a kid with a straw hat who was given a gift by someone who believed in him before he'd done anything to deserve belief. And that vulnerability, that specific and quiet origin story of Luffy's faith in himself, is what the live action uses to transition from the relatively familiar East Blue world into the genuinely alien strangeness of the Grand Line. Because the moment they sail out of Logtown is the moment everything changes. The passage through the Calm Belt, the ring of absolutely still water that surrounds the Grand Line, teeming with sea kings so enormous they could swallow the Going Merry without noticing, is handled with a level of visual ambition that represents a real step up from Season 1's production scale. These aren't just big sea creatures. So Vivi is now with the crew, and this changes everything about the dynamic on the Going Merry, in ways that are subtle at first, and then increasingly significant. She's not a fighter, not in the way Zoro or Sanji are. She's not a navigator or a cook or a sniper. She's a princess who has spent months living a lie inside a criminal organization, carrying the weight of an entire kingdom on her shoulders, and she has gotten very good at appearing calm while being terrified. Charithra Chandran plays this tension beautifully. There's a quality in her performance of someone who has learned to manage fear rather than eliminate it, who has made peace with being scared, because being scared is simply the permanent condition of someone doing what she's doing. She fits into the crew's rhythm quickly, not because she's trying to, but because the crew, particularly Nami, recognizes in her something they understand. The particular exhaustion of someone who has been strong alone for too long. The Little Garden arc is where Season 2 starts swinging for something genuinely ambitious. And it's also where the show most clearly demonstrates that it has internalized what makes One Piece work, rather than just transcribing events from the source material. Little Garden, as I mentioned earlier, is a prehistoric island. Enormous, ancient, ecologically impossible. The Grand Line contains islands like this, places where time moved differently, where evolution took a different path, where the ordinary rules of the natural world simply don't apply. And what the live action does with this setting is interesting, because it doesn't lean entirely on the spectacle of it. Yes, there are dinosaurs. Yes, the scale is extraordinary. Yes, the production design is building something that feels genuinely prehistoric in a way that isn't just Jurassic Park redux. There's a quality of genuine wildness to it, an untameness that feels earned rather than designed. But the show is smart enough to know that the setting isn't the point. The setting is the container for two characters who represent something specific and important about what Oda values most in people. Dory and Broggy are giants. Literal giants, not metaphorical ones, not just very large humans, but 200-year-old warrior giants from the island of Elbaf who have been fighting each other on Little Garden for a century. 100 years of combat between two men who respect each other completely, who love each other in the way that only true rivals can, who have been locked into this duel for so long that the original reason for it has faded, and what remains is pure principle. Their honor demanded this fight. Their honor has sustained it. Neither one will surrender, and neither one will die. And so they've been at it for 100 years on this prehistoric island at the edge of the world, with only each other and the ancient creatures around them as company. When Luffy encounters Dory first, the interaction is quietly wonderful, because Luffy doesn't find the situation tragic or absurd. He finds it admirable. 100-year fight between people who refuse to dishonor themselves. That's not sad to Luffy, that's magnificent. He treats Dory as an equal, which, given the size differential, is both funny and, on reflection, exactly right. Luffy doesn't calibrate his respect based on size or power in the conventional sense. He calibrates it based on what a person has committed to, what they've decided to stand for and stand behind. And Dory, who has lived this long, solitary life and probably hasn't been spoken to as a peer in decades, responds to that with a kind of gruff, surprised warmth. The complication arrives, as complications always do in Oda's world, from Baroque works. Mr. 3, David Dastmalchian, magnificent, wearing that artist's smock and radiating a very specific brand of theatrical villainy that somehow manages to be funny and genuinely threatening at the same time, has been sent to deal with the Straw Hats and with Vivi, and his method involves rigging the fight between Dory and Broggy. His Devil Fruit ability, the Wax Fruit, allows him to generate and control wax at will, which means he can create incredibly detailed, incredibly durable constructions out of it. He's essentially a sculptor with unlimited medium and zero moral constraints. The trap he sets for the giants and for the crew is elaborate in the way that only someone who genuinely enjoys their work would bother making elaborate. There's a craftsmanship to his villainy that Dastmalchian plays with exactly the right note of self-satisfied artistry. Mr. 3 doesn't just want to complete the job, he wants it to be impressive. The resolution of the Little Garden sequence involves the crew dismantling this trap in a way that requires everyone contributing their specific skills, which is exactly the kind of ensemble problem solving that the show has been building towards since Season 1. Nami's navigation brain finding the logical flaw in the wax construction. Usopp's particular combination of ingenuity and barely managed panic producing something that actually works. Sanji doing what Sanji does with a level of focused intensity that his casual demeanor mostly obscures. And Luffy just hitting things very hard and very accurately, which is ultimately what the situation requires. The giants watching this unfold, these two ancient, enormous warriors watching this tiny crew of young people refuse to give up, brings the emotional note that the arc is reaching for. Dory and Broggy don't need to be rescued. They're going to keep fighting regardless of what happens. But what they witness in the Straw Hats is something they recognize. People who have decided what they stand for and won't be moved from it. That's the only language these two have ever spoken. Then the snow starts. And we move toward Drum Island, and the season shifts registers in a way that I think represents its most emotionally sophisticated storytelling. Nami gets sick. This sounds simple, and in a lesser show, it would be simple. A plot mechanism to get the crew to an island where a doctor lives. But the way the live action handles it adds weight. Nami, who has been the most pragmatic member of the crew, the one most likely to voice reasonable concerns about unreasonable plans, the one whose competence is so consistent that the others sometimes forget she's operating under pressure too. Nami collapses. And watching the crew respond to that is genuinely moving. Luffy, without hesitation, without any deliberation whatsoever, picks her up and carries her through a blizzard looking for help. He doesn't have a plan. He doesn't have information about whether help exists. He just keeps moving because stopping is not something he's willing to consider. And the physical performance from Iñaki Godoy in these scenes, the way he holds her, the way his expression carries something that isn't fear exactly, but is the closest thing to fear that Luffy gets, which is the possibility that someone he cares about might not be okay, is genuinely affecting. Drum Island is cold. Not just meteorologically cold, spiritually cold in a way that the production design communicates beautifully. This is an island that was recently conquered, its king ousted by pirates, its resources stripped, its people left with almost nothing. The buildings carry the marks of something violent that happened and then left. The people move through their town with the particular wariness of people who have been burned before and are waiting to be burned again. And at the top of the highest mountain, accessible only by a terrifying vertical climb, lives Dr. Kureha, who has been the only doctor on this island since the one person she trained, the one person she allowed herself to care about, left. Katie Seagal's Dr. Kureha is everything the trailer promised, and then some. She's ferociously competent, aggressively unsentimental, and radiates the specific energy of someone who has outlived multiple generations of people, and has made a kind of bitter peace with the fact that caring about people means eventually losing them. She treats Nami, she feeds the crew, she insults everyone enthusiastically, and underneath all of that armor is someone who is still carrying the absence of Hiruluk and Chopper, like a weight she's chosen not to put down. Because putting it down would mean accepting certain things about loss and love that are easier to carry than to examine. And then there is Chopper. Tony Chopper. The reindeer who ate the human fruit and can transform between reindeer form, humanoid form, and a heavy point form that combines the physical power of both. Chopper is not the first character we meet in this story, and he's not the one with the most dramatic arc in Season 2 taken individually. But he is the one that the season has been quietly building toward emotionally from the first episode. Because Chopper's backstory, the story of how he came to be this lonely, ostracized creature on top of a mountain with a dead doctor's flag flying over a crumbling castle, is one of the most genuinely heartbreaking things Oda has ever written. The flashback that Season 2 gives to Chopper's past is handled with real delicacy. Dr. Hiruluk, the quack doctor who found Chopper when he was just a young reindeer frightened of his own transformation, who took him in and fed him and taught him and gave him the beginning of a reason to exist. Hiruluk is a man who has terminal illness and has spent his remaining time chasing a legend. A sakura tree that supposedly bloomed on Drum Island once, centuries ago, and whose petals had miraculous healing properties. He believes in this story the way people believe in things when the alternative is despair. And Chopper, who has absorbed Hiruluk's medical knowledge and his determination and his specific quality of stubborn, hopeful love, carries all of that into the present. The final scene of the Hiruluk flashback, the moment of his death, and what it means to Chopper, and how Chopper has been living with that meaning. The live action gives it exactly the runtime and the silence it deserves. Michaela Hoover's voice work as Chopper communicates something in those moments that transcends the technical challenge of voice acting a CGI reindeer. There's a genuine ache to it. When Chopper decides to join the crew, When Luffy, without any preamble or any attempt to make a convincing argument, just says, "You're my doctor," with the absolute certainty of someone announcing a natural law. It's the kind of moment that One Piece has always been best at. Luffy doesn't ask, he doesn't negotiate, he doesn't explain why this makes sense or what Chopper has to offer or what the crew needs. He just sees Chopper, the real Chopper, the lonely creature who has been waiting for someone to see him without flinching, and he claims him as crew, as his. And Chopper's reaction, this mixture of furious denial and helpless, overwhelmed, completely unconcealed joy, is the most purely One Piece thing Season 2 does. Let me step back from the plot for a minute and actually tell you what I think. Because we've been running through narrative for a while now, and it's time to be direct about whether Season 2 is actually good, not just whether it has good source material. The answer is yes, with specific qualifications. Yes. Here's what the show does right, and I want to be precise about this rather than just enthusiastic. The casting, which was already strong in Season 1, has deepened. The returning cast has settled into their roles with a confidence that makes every scene feel inhabited rather than performed. Iñaki Godoy's Luffy is one of the most technically difficult performances on television right now. Playing someone who is simultaneously childlike and profound, physically extraordinary and emotionally unguarded, who needs to be funny without being a clown, and heroic without being self-aware about his heroism. And he makes it look effortless in Season 2, in a way that wasn't quite there yet in Season 1. Mackenyu's Zoro has found layers that the first season established, but didn't fully explore. Emily Rudd's Nami is doing something quietly extraordinary. She's playing a character who is pragmatic and guarded, and occasionally ruthless and entirely lovable. And she's making all those qualities feel consistent, rather than contradictory. Jacob Romero Gibson's Usopp remains one of the show's secret weapons, bringing a genuine physical comedy to his cowardice that never tips into parody. And Taz Skylar's Sanji, look, Sanji is hard. Sanji is a character who could very easily become a caricature, given his particular obsessions, and his particular fighting style, and his particular relationship with women. Skylar keeps him grounded in something real. The chivalry feels genuine rather than performative. The skill feels earned. The new cast additions largely work. Joe Manganiello's Crocodile doesn't have enormous screen time in Season 2. He's being held in reserve, wisely, as the slow burn threat rather than the immediate antagonist. But every scene he's in has a quality of settled danger. He's not rushing toward anything. He doesn't need to. Charithra Chandran's Vivi is everything I hoped for. David Dasmalchian's Mr. 3 is a joy. Katie Seagal's Kureha is perfect. These additions feel like organic extensions of the world rather than celebrity casting decisions. And that's a harder thing to achieve than it looks. The visual ambition is unquestionably higher this season. The production team spent more money, and it shows. Not in a wasteful, spectacle for spectacle's sake way, but in the texture of the world. Little Garden feels genuinely prehistoric. Drum Island feels genuinely cold and bruised. The Grand Line itself has a quality of wrongness that serves the story rather than just decorating it. The Going Merry continues to feel like a character in its own right, which matters enormously because of what that ship means to the crew and what's eventually going to happen to it. The writing handles tone better than Season 1, which is notable because Season 1 was already better at tone balancing than most live-action adaptations manage. There are moments in Season 2 that are genuinely funny. The Whiskey Peak sequence, Chopper's furious denial of wanting to join the crew while obviously wanting desperately to join the crew, Usopp's various catastrophic reactions to prehistoric fauna, and then moments that are genuinely devastating, and the transitions between those registers don't feel lurching or jarring. They feel natural, the way emotions actually move through real experiences, rather than the way they're engineered in lesser dramatic writing. Where Season 2 is less sure of itself is in pacing. 5 arcs in 8 episodes is an enormous amount of ground to cover, and there are points, particularly in the middle of the season, around the transition from Little Garden to Drum Island, where you can feel the compression. characters who deserve more time don't get it. Emotional beats that need space to land are occasionally pushed slightly too fast by the need to reach the next story point. The Drum Island flashback for Chopper, while handled with real care, could have used an additional episode to fully breathe. The giants on Little Garden deserve more scenes. These aren't fatal problems. They're the inevitable consequence of structural choices made at the story planning level, and the show compensates for them with performances and visual storytelling in a way that minimizes the damage. But they're real, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. There's also a question about how the show handles the growing political complexity of the Baroque work storyline, the background architecture of Crocodile's plan for Alabasta, which starts getting genuinely intricate in Season 2. The anime and manga had more time to lay this out slowly, to let the conspiracy reveal itself in organic ways. The live action has to compress that exposition into a season that's already very full, and it makes choices about what to emphasize and what to abbreviate that are generally smart but occasionally leave you feeling like you've had to do some homework on your own to fill in the gaps. For manga readers and anime fans, this isn't a problem. For genuinely new viewers, it might occasionally be disorienting. But here is the larger point I want to make, and I want to make it clearly. Season 2 of One Piece is doing something that almost no live-action adaptation has ever managed to do. It's taking a beloved, intensely specific creative vision. 26 years of world building, hundreds of characters, dozens of interlocking thematic concerns. And it's finding the soul of that vision rather than just the surface. Most adaptations of popular IP strip the source material down to recognizable shapes. They keep the character names and the broad plot movements and the iconic visual moments, and they discard everything else, everything underneath, all the specific emotional texture and thematic richness that made people love the thing in the first place. Netflix's One Piece does not do that. It finds the thing that Oda has always been doing, which is using adventure and fantasy and completely ridiculous fictional conceits to tell stories about loneliness and belonging and what it means to make a promise and keep it, about the nature of justice and the difference between law and right, about what happens to people who have been hurt by the world and what they build out of those wounds. And it does that faithfully, not literally, faithfully. There's a difference, and it matters. The show understands that Luffy's story is not fundamentally about being the best fighter, or collecting the most powerful crew, or finding the most valuable treasure. It's about a particular quality of human connection. About the fact that some people move through the world in a way that makes other people more fully themselves. Luffy doesn't recruit his crew by offering them things. He recruits them by seeing them, by recognizing in each person he encounters something essential and specific and worth fighting for, and then fighting for it without calculating whether he can win, or whether it's strategically wise, or whether he'll get anything out of it. He just fights because the person matters. And fighting for people who matter is what you do. That's it. That's the whole philosophy. In Season 2, across all 5 of its arcs, across all its spectacle and humor and heartbreak, is an extended meditation on why that philosophy is both impossibly simple and incredibly hard, and completely worth attempting anyway. Ichiro Oda has been involved in the production as a creative consultant throughout, and his fingerprints are on the decisions that matter most. The tonal choices, the character moments that the showrunners chose to preserve and center rather than abbreviate or cut. Those decisions reflect someone who understands what the soul of the source material is. Matt Owens and the writing staff have earned the trust they're being given, because they're demonstrating in Season 2 that they understand not just what happens in these arcs, but why it happens, why it matters, what it's for. Is Season 2 perfect? No. Is it better than Season 1? On the whole, yes. It's more confident, more visually ambitious, emotionally richer, and structurally bolder, even if the pacing trade-offs are occasionally costly. Is it the best live-action adaptation of an anime or manga ever made? I think so. I genuinely think so, and I've watched a lot of them. The bar is unfortunately pretty low in some respects, but One Piece is clearing it by enough of a margin that the comparison barely feels relevant anymore. It's not succeeding for a live-action adaptation, it's succeeding as television. Full stop. The final episodes of Season 2, which I'm being deliberately vague about because the specific emotional payoffs deserve to be experienced rather than described, take everything the season has been building and land it with a precision and a tenderness that left me genuinely, unironically moved. There are moments in the last 2 episodes that I think will be talked about for a long time. Not as great moments of adaptation, but as great moments of television, period. The way the season closes, the note it lands on before pointing the Going Merry toward the next horizon, the thing that Luffy says in the final scene that is so simple it should be banal and is instead devastating. All of that works. All of it lands. And sitting with it afterward, trying to articulate what it is that makes this show consistently capable of doing that, I keep coming back to the same answer. It believes. The show believes in its characters, in its world, in its story, in the people watching it. It doesn't hedge or condescend or play it safe. It commits, completely and without embarrassment, to the idea that these ridiculous, beautiful, impossible people and their impossible dream deserve your full emotional investment. And they're right. They do. And Season 2 makes you feel that in a way that justifies every minute of the 2+ hours you've just spent watching it. That's my honest assessment, not hype, not performing enthusiasm for the algorithm, just a person who's been watching television and following this franchise for a long time telling you, this is worth your time, more than worth it. All right, so if you've stayed with me this long, and genuinely, thank you, because this was not a short one. I hope you got something real out of it. Not just a summary you could have found anywhere, but an actual sense of what Season 2 is doing, and why it matters in the larger landscape of what's happening on television right now. If this kind of deep dive review is the thing you've been looking for, if you're tired of 5-minute hot takes and algorithmically optimized clip compilations, and you actually want someone to sit down and think with you about movies and shows that are worth thinking about, then hit that subscribe button right now, because this channel is built specifically for you. We don't chase clicks here. We don't manufacture outrage or drop fake spoilers for views. Every review on this channel is the product of someone who actually watched the thing, actually thought about it, actually cared enough to be honest about what worked and what didn't. We cover upcoming Hollywood releases, blockbusters, prestige television, franchise deep dives, and we cover them with the kind of care and specificity that we think the best stories deserve. Drop your thoughts on One Piece Season 2 in the comments. I want to know what you think. Whether you came in as a fan, whether this was your first exposure to the series, what surprised you, what moved you, what you think they got wrong. The conversation in this comment section is consistently one of the best on YouTube, and that's entirely because of the people watching. So keep that going. If you haven't already, check out our Season 1 breakdown. It's in the linked section, along with our deep dive on the history of live-action anime adaptations and why they almost always fail. Context for why what Netflix is pulling off here is such an unusual achievement. Share this video if it added something to how you're thinking about the show. It genuinely helps the channel more than anything else you can do. And come back, because we have reviews coming for everything that matters this year, and we're going to give all of it exactly this kind of attention. See you in the next one.